Hello and welcome to our session. Our session is titled Unlocking the Potential of the Neurodiverse Talent Pool, the Power of Inclusive Assessment and Recruitment. My name is Kristen Allen. I'm a senior manager on the science team at SHL. I've had the privilege of leading our neurodiversity research program over the last 2 years with the goal of identifying evidence-based best practices for serving the neurodiverse talent pool. I'm joined today by our guests, Valentina Brooke-Lee from Florida International University and Mike Adams from Purple, to help us discuss the importance of the research on inclusive recruiting and hiring practices from a variety of perspectives. Valentina and Mike, thank you so much for being here today. Would you each like to please introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your passion for this topic and why it's so important to you?
Sure. I am an associate professor of industrial and organizational psychology in the Department of Psychology at FIU. So my focus is on research and best practices that can help us create healthier workplaces, understanding the psychosocial conditions that lead someone or can help promote someone to be able to thrive, feel engaged and valued at work, and also create better workplaces for people with disabilities.
Brilliant. Hello, I'm Mike Adams and I am Chief Exec of Purple, which is fundamentally an organisation that is changing the disability conversation from one which has traditionally seen disability as a kind of charity welfare about vulnerable people and the responsibility of government, and moving that dial so disability becomes about contribution, about value, about community, and about opportunity. And to do that, we have to open up the world of disability to businesses, as well as raising the expectations of disabled people. So I'm delighted to be involved with webinars like this, which, quite frankly, 5 years ago would not have happened. And in this context and the world that we live in today, it is really important that businesses can tap into the greatest talent, of which there are huge numbers of people on the neurodiverse spectrum, people with autism, that actually could add real value to organizations. And there's currently a disconnect. And it's about how do we unlock, as you said, Christine, how do we unlock the opportunity for businesses that then unlock huge opportunities for these individuals in their day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, just as a bit of background, the way that we are connected is SHL and Purple have been in partnership for a number of years. And that partnership was really the catalyst that got us thinking about our neurodiversity research program and caused us to start to take action on that. So it's really exciting to be sitting here today talking about the progress that we've made so far, but we know there's so much more to do in breaking down those barriers.
And dare I say it, you have made such huge progress, and we are really proud to be working with you. And in terms of the relationship, it is about driving an understanding of talent acquisition and recruitment and retention of disabled employees, but it's also about seeing disabled people first and foremost as customers who happen to have an impairment. And I think what we have realized and what we all know is that disability is a global topic, and it's really interesting in terms of workplaces and recruitment. It doesn't matter whether I'm having conversations with organizations in the UK, in the US, or the Far East. The issues are exactly the same. And I think the solutions are equally the same. So it's great to be joining you today.
And I think I was just going to add to that, Mike. You earlier said it's a conversation of talent acquisition and a conversation of employment. And I think that although we'll be focusing on recruitment and hiring today, and the candidate experience, of course, it is a systemic issue across all stages of the employment life cycle, right? From recruitment and hiring to onboarding and socializing to performance management and feedback and growth opportunities. And so there really is an opportunity to do so much across so many different stages of what talent acquisition involves.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And if you take it back a stage or two, when businesses, and certainly when I go into businesses and talk disability, their first reaction is, he's coming in to talk about wheelchair users. And we all know the international sign is the wheelchair.
Yeah.
But actually it reflects 8% of the global disability population, and 80% of disabled people have hidden disabilities, including mild to moderate neurodiverse spectrum impairments. And therefore businesses are having to reorientate their understanding of disability inclusion and the assumptions that they make and the solutions that they can then use to tap in to this fantastic talent pool, which evidence will show provides really, really value, not only to the individual, but to the business, but equally to the staff that work in the team and the organization. So this is an issue that has real resonance to the majority of people across the world.
It really is a global movement. I mean, SHL is a global organization, and we have seen our clients over the past 2 years or so really accelerate interest into asking questions about, are these assessments accessible, specifically with neurodiverse candidates? And so thinking back when these questions started coming in, we were just kind of scratching our heads. We don't know. We turned to the research to see what is the best way to advise our clients about the best practices in this field. And there's not a lot of research out there. And so that's where we started to think about how important this is and how we wanted to have a role in researching and identifying those best practices, which got our research program kicked off. Valentina, do you want to talk a little bit about the project that we're working on together, where we're looking at the experiences of autistic individuals when previewing our assessments?
Absolutely, Kristen. So when we started to identify research directions, it became very evident that while there's a rich history of candidate reactions and candidate experience literature and best practices, most of that research really was based on a neurotypical sample or did not specify the sample, right? Because it wasn't foremost an important feature of that research. So it seemed a logical first step for us to understand and actually include the voices of the very same people that we are looking to assess at the point of pre-hire, and allow them to tell us what their reactions are to the assessments, how they feel about the content that's being presented to them. Does it, does it seem job relatable? Does it allow them to showcase their skills and strengths? Does it cause unnecessary anxiety and stress? What are the features of these assessments that may require some modifications or accommodations? And so we decided that we would approach this using a qualitative data approach, actually interviewing autistic adults who were either in professional level jobs or seeking professional level jobs, and being able to display to them pieces of SHL's content. And by means of an interview, semi-structured interview, we could ask them questions that can give us the insights we'll need to shape best practices for assessments or for the use of assessments. And also understanding perhaps if reactions to these assessments also differ based on the type of assessment, right? Because we're broadly using the term assessment or pre-hire assessment or employment test. And we all know that that could mean a lot of different things, from behavioral-based competencies to situational judgment tests to interviews to, cognitive ability or personality. And so we wanted to also be able to make some comparisons and see if we could identify whether some types of competencies or constructs or types of assessments would be better suited to use. And I think we come into it, Kristen, I like to say, and this is one of the things that really makes this partnership with SHL such a positive experience, is that we come into it with a really open mind, right? The open mind to learn that perhaps some of the assessment content we have really needs to be reconsidered from beginning to end in order to truly make it accessible. And we're humble enough to say that we have a lot to learn. But I think that we're doing this the right way by really giving salience to the voices of the autistic applicant themselves in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And as you say, in some cases, it may be that the assessment content from end to end, we need to take a second look at, but there may also be some small features that can be adjusted. And, our goal is really to identify what are those things that could help to make this a better experience for those candidates, so we can integrate those into our assessment development process. We know that candidates are hesitant to speak up and disclose when they have a disability or they need accommodation. So by having these interviews and understanding the experiences, we're really looking to understand how we can build our assessments in a way that are going to be fair and inclusive for all candidates, ultimately where hopefully accommodations won't be needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real point when you start delving into what you're doing. Can you make assessments fairer for everybody? And just not one group of people? And Valentina talks about, and absolutely right, is drawing on the lived experience and voice of individuals who have been through that process, who can give you fantastic insights into what works and what doesn't work. And I remember talking to one hiring company in the UK about this neurodiversity and asking why they did it in this particular way. And the response was, because we've always done it this way. And actually, they were ruling out by their assessments this whole group of people who couldn't work out and connect what was required, and saw this as a kind of guessing game for which they weren't going to play. Fundamentally, we have to work out what you are assessing, and then are there alternative ways in which you can reach the answers that you require in order to make hiring decisions. And I just think for businesses these days, securing talent and retaining talent is really important. And I always talk about, in the UK, 22% of the population in the UK have rights under disability legislation. And can any organisation rule out, a fifth of the population because they can't work out and think through alternative reasonable adjustments in this context in the assessment process? And the answer's got to be no. So I think there is huge opportunity to assess people, recruit people, and retain people that works for the business and the individual.
If I can add to that, Mike, as you spoke, a couple of things came to mind. One is the notion that you provided the example of the employer who said, well, this is how we've been doing things. What do you mean? Right? It really brings attention to the fact that assessments, for example, fit in if we can think of the selection process, they fit in a very specific point of that selection process, right? But what comes prior to that is this notion of how do we recruit and how do we identify the person who's going to be successful in this role, right? What are the knowledge, skills, abilities, talents that are going to make someone really excel in this role? And I think that's a space that comes right before the testing piece or the assessment piece that also needs a lot of attention, because we need to open up our minds to I guess, redefining what makes somebody successful in the job, maybe getting away from old habits of thinking that certain skill sets, which sometimes have nothing to do really with how one performs the job, need to be present in that candidate, right? And so it kind of speaks back to the earlier point of how really this is about making systemic changes to the entire process for an organization who's truly committed to creating opportunities for people with disabilities, right? From even the moment of defining that job description, we have to think of that job description with a disability inclusion lens. The other thought that came to mind is that, modifications are oftentimes, they're small in scope, small in cost, and can have a tremendous positive impact on individuals seeking employment, because there's a certain fear that, if I want to make my hiring process inclusive, maybe that means a whole rehaul, and how costly would that be? And the reality is that we're looking at universal design principles for the hiring process, right? Where everyone can benefit. Many of these changes don't need to be significant in cost and time in order for them to have significant advantages or create significant advantages for a population that has otherwise been disadvantaged in the process of hiring.
I absolutely agree with you. Just to come back, if I can, there are things that we have always done this way, and I always think about job descriptions about need a driver's license, and 85 times out of 100 you go, well, why do you need to have a driving license to do this job? And of course the answer is you don't. And there's other things like, breaking down, what do you actually mean by interpersonal skills? What do you actually mean by communication skills for the job that you're asking the person to do? And really good bit of a tip that I've learned in the last few months and in interviews is what we call the 6-second rule. And with people on the neurodiverse spectrum, you ask a question and then you wait 6 seconds to enable that individual to process the question that's got asked and then think about their response, which is much more rich when they have that space. But human nature we don't like silence. So, after 2 or 3 seconds, someone looking at you, you jump in and try to answer for them. And these are the kind of things, there are the details around assessments, and then there are the hints, tips and tricks that totally change the landscape of the individual's experience with the organization in assessment. Your point about small things can make an absolute big difference is really so true.
Yeah, I'm reminded of some recent research that I read about just providing more information before an assessment experience or an interview to the candidate about what they can expect can help to alleviate anxiety and improve performance, not only for neurodiverse candidates, but for all candidates. So it's these little things that we're hoping to discover that we can implement as best practices to create a better experience for everyone. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I just want to ask you each, if there's one thing that you would like our listeners to walk away with today as a key takeaway, what would that be?
I think it's really straightforward. If you are listening today, go away and absolutely ensure you do something. I'm hoping that people would have learned something today. So even if it is the 6-second rule, and from experience, people have come back to me and gone, oh, Mike, God, that worked so well. Why didn't I know this 10 years ago? And I go, well, I only knew it 2 years ago. So think about how you could open up your assessment process to bring the biggest pool of talent at your disposal and use your expertise to work out how best you can identify and support that individual to showcase their talent to you. Because I think a lot of businesses are missing out on huge talented individuals because of historical assumptions that are made. And so there is an organizational approach to this. If you're really committed to bringing in the greatest talent, then think about your whole neurodiverse approach, from your policy, your practice, your training of line managers and the teams and staff. And you will find it's really rich, really rewarding. And what we do know is that staff members and colleagues also will find that of real value in, becoming a provider of choice, an employee of choice. So it works at so many different levels.
We are here discussing assessment and the point of candidate experience, but let's not forget what happens after someone's hired. So if we're putting so much effort and energy and time into creating a hiring process that is more inclusive, it doesn't stop at the moment that we bring that candidate into our organizations. It must continue. So knowing how can we offer the right supports. And we know that there's quite a bit about both, social emotional supports, instrumental supports that can be fruitful for the neurodiverse employee, but also even our physical and built environment. So if we can consider, what's going to happen after we bring the individual in, so that we can truly create the conditions to help that person succeed. I think that is an important part of the conversation that any organization that is serious about, either starting or growing or further promoting their disability inclusion efforts needs to think about. And I always say it starts with, as we already spoke about, from understanding and defining the job, to the process of recruiting candidates and knowing where we're going to recruit and how can we make recruitment efforts inclusive, to obviously the hiring process as we've chatted about here, but all the way up until, and if there is a moment of termination, I think we can also be thinking about ways in which we make that unpleasant moment to anyone, but there are times when organizations have to make that choice, that we can create a process that sets people up for future success, right? As opposed to leaving them back in the place where maybe they started many years prior to being employed. And I think that's a really important sign of a true commitment from an organization. Some of the organizations that we've worked with have a number of different programs in place to ensure that people who need additional supports are moved and placed into jobs that are best suited for their skills and talents, right? And if that moment comes where that relationship is no longer fruitful for neither the employer or the employer, they have systems in place to ensure that person is supported out and into future jobs. And I think, to me, again, that is a real telltale sign of an organization that's committed to the population that we're trying to serve. So that's where I would also leave the audience, sort of thinking about, beyond the candidate experience, beyond the point of assessment, what other changes can we make? What other modifications can we make to ensure that the organization is set up for everyone to succeed?
But that's just to come back, it's so right. It is a good thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but commercially for businesses, it is the thing to do as well. And this is not go back to my original point, but this is not about charity. Mm-hmm. This is about opportunity. This is about community, and this works for businesses. I think on all levels, this is good, and this is the right thing, and go away and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I hope our audience has enjoyed your conversation as much as I have. Thank you all for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day.